Mr Martin Docherty-Hughes.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's good to see you in your place this afternoon. First of all, let me thank the Office of the Speaker for allowing this very important adjournment debate this afternoon in relation to my constituent, son of the Rock, Jagtar Singh Johal. Well, it's not straightforward. I have found many ways, as you will know, Madam Deputy Speaker, over the last year to raise the issue of my constituents' ongoing detention in India on the floor of the House. And it is a matter of ongoing concern that I must continue to find other ways to do so. And one critical element is seeking a meeting, as I'm sure everyone will have heard me over the last year, a meeting with the Foreign Secretary of the day, with myself and with the Singh Johal family. And I'm also glad that Jagtar's brother is actually in the undergallery with us today, who has travelled down from Dumbarton. Jagtar Singh Johal is 31 and grew up in the ancient borough of Dumbarton. And let me remind Hansard that that's borough as in B-U-R-G-H in my constituency, attending Our Lady and St Patrick's High School in the town, making him a true son of the Rock of Dumbarton. In October 2017, Jagtar travelled along with his father and his brothers, including Gurpreet, to be married to his wife, also known as Gurpreet. And they were married on the 18th of October 2017. A joyful occasion for the entire family. While the rest of the immediate family travelled back to Scotland, on November the 1st, Jagtar decided to stay in Punjab with his wife, as she, as many will know, would require a visa to enter the UK. A visa, I must note, that she has yet still to be granted, though I do appreciate that this does not enter into the Minister of State's review. On Sunday the 4th of November 2017, Jagtar did something that most couples usually do on a Saturday. Went shopping, we all do it, with Gurpreet in Ramamandi, just out Jalandhar city, when he was suddenly stopped by two men with no distinct markings or identification. He was hooded, taken away from his wife a little over a fortnight after their wedding. While it subsequently emerged that these men were plainclothes police officers and that he was being taken to Baka Burana, and forgive my pronunciation if I don't get it correct, police station, I can only imagine the horror that Gurpreet, his wife, must have felt seeing her husband being taken in such a manner. It is a matter of some considerable sadness that this was not the end of the ordeal. Jagtar was taken some considerable distance. I estimated around about 2 hours from where he had been held in Jalandhar. It was there, according to Jagtar himself, that torture began almost immediately. And I must warn the House that I am now going to describe this. The torture took place over 4 days, from the 4th until the 7th of November at Moga. The torture took place intermittently, numerous times each day. Electric shocks were administered by placing the crocodile clips on my ears, my earlobes, nipples and private parts. Multiple shocks were given each day. At some stages, I was left unable to walk and had to be carried out of the interrogation room. Since then, I had problems urinating. Let me just one moment, and I will to the honourable gentleman, because I want to make sure we have a thread of this, Madam Deputy Speaker. Threats of taking me to a remote location where I would be shot dead were also given. At one point, petrol was brought into the room and was threatened with being burnt, and you would assume burnt alive from that point. The police forced me, that is Jagtar, to make recordings in which I had to make, I had to name, according to what they tell me to say. Blank pages were also forcibly signed for me. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman quickly. Okay.
I thank the honourable gentleman for bringing this forward and again for raising this issue, which is a very important issue, and the numbers in the House would be an indication of that, and for taking the intervention. Would the honourable gentleman not agree with me that it's essential that the treatment of any British citizen, national in custody, must be a concern for this government and for the Minister, and there is a onus on government to ensure that no torture of British subjects is accepted wherever it may be in the world, and whenever government knows about that, then action has to be taken.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention. I'm sure he'll know that I won't disagree.
No, I know.
It has subsequently, and I think it was important to set in context the actual manner of my. Bear with me one moment. The actual indication of my constituents' predicament. Extremely important to relate that to the House. I just wish, before I will give way in just a moment, I think it's important to know that Jagtar's letter is clear. Some would say an unemotional language, despite the horror to which he must have experienced. It is also available, if they wish, to the state authorities of the Republic of India to investigate if they should ever wish to do so. I will certainly give way to the honourable gentleman.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way and for his excellent leadership on this issue on behalf of his constituent. And I think from the outset, would my honourable friend not agree that what we have been asking for is a fair and due process in terms of unhindered legal access, unhindered consular access, an independent medical investigation, an examination, which has thus far not been the case, and also for getting answers from ministers on behalf of your constituent, which unfortunately have not been forthcoming either.
Certainly, again, won't disagree with the honourable gentleman, and I'm sure when I go through the rest of my speech, I will answer every element of his questions pertinently and precisely, and I won't disagree with them. Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK High Commission in Chandigarh was initially aware of Jagtar's detention on November 6, 2017. It first attempted to visit him on the 10th of November, although I must make clear to everyone in the House that that authority was refused by the state authorities. I first raised the issue via point of order on this very floor of this House, Madam Deputy Speaker, on the 15th of November of that year, the day before the former Commonwealth Office officials were granted access. The Tuesday after, and it's important, Madam Deputy Speaker, to set the process, to set the narrative, the historical reality, even that short period over a year. The Tuesday after, during Foreign Office questions, Jagtar's brother, Gurpreet, who is with us today, was actually in the public gallery as he joins us, and heard me ask about the case. He, like I, was, of course, encouraged at the point to hear the response from the then Minister of State, the Honourable Member for Penrith and the Borders, say, and I think it's important to quote, "We take any allegations of torture seriously. Indeed, does the Indian government. It is completely unconstitutional and offensive." I'll give way to my honourable friend just a one moment after this quote. "It is completely unconstitutional and offensive to the British government. We will work very closely to investigate the matter and will, of course, take," and let's see what he has to say, "take extreme action if a British citizen is being tortured." But before I give way to my honourable friend, these are strong words, Madam Deputy Speaker, and which were much appreciated by the family and myself. While I will ask again at the end, I would really ask that the Minister today enlightens us as to what extreme action was and what their own investigations concluded. We should also note that the then Minister was, of course, removed with due haste. I'll give way to my honourable friend.
Thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. He's been very tenacious in this, certainly over the last 12 months. Many of us have countersigned letters along with him to the relevant Indian authorities. But the Minister's really got to answer for what the Deputy High Commissioner was doing, making statements in the Times, as I understand it, that certainly didn't help Jagtar's situation. The Minister's got to explain that to us and why torture was allowed to continue without any real representations. I hope the Minister's going to answer these questions. And there's a pattern development here where British citizens are in Iran, or any other country now seem to be under a threat. I wonder what the Foreign Office is doing about that. I hope the Minister will answer that when he comes to his wind-up.
I'm very glad of my honourable friend's intervention. I'm very grateful for his tenacious support in the last year, as I am of so many members across the floor of the House, many actually who can't be here today because, of course, business has adjourned so early, because would you believe it, we seemingly have nothing during general government business to debate, Madam Deputy Speaker. What an incredible moment to be here in the history of this place, where the House business falls at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But just before I do to my very honourable friend, I would say that also gives me the opportunity to talk for quite some time about my constituent's case. I'll give way to my good friend, the honourable member.
I thank my honourable comrade for giving way. He's making a fantastic speech, and he has been a tenacious campaigner. As well as not just members of the House, would he give due credit to the hundreds of my constituents who have written to me about this issue, and I'm sure I'm not the only honourable member in this House who's had hundreds of constituents writing to them, really concerned about the lack of government action on this issue.
I certainly I'm grateful for that, and there are citizens across all of these islands, and I have to say that they're not just members of our community who happen to be Sikh looking to support Jagtar Singh Johal. Of course, the Sikh community across these islands are profoundly disturbed by this issue, but citizens across the whole of the UK and also abroad, Canada, Australia and other nations are communicating with me on a very regular basis to extend to the family their support in terms of due process. I'll give way to the honourable lady.
I thank the honourable gentleman. I just say I wanted to pay tribute to his formidable leadership on behalf of his constituent. Would he agree with me, apart from direct contact with the Indian government, it's important that the UK government also makes representations to the UN, in particular around the UN special procedures and other UN mechanisms, to try and push this case further?
The honourable member is of course correct, and I will go into that in a bit more depth later on in my speech. I do think one of my honourable friends was wanting to intervene. I'll give way to my honourable friend, the member for Glasgow Central.
I thank him very much for giving way and for pursuing Jagtar's case in the way that he has. He has, in solidarity with him, the support of the 3 Gurdwara in the Glasgow Central constituency. And would you agree with me that Jagtar's case raises wider concerns for each of the members of those congregations when they go to travel to India, that they may face similar threats, and that there are real and genuine worries there for their own safety?
I couldn't disagree, as I would often say, with my honourable friend, and the Gurdwaras, not only in Scotland but across the whole of the UK, I think share that concern about the ability of the Sikh diaspora to return to India and to engage freely. It's also an issue for all of us as citizens, not just those of a certain specific faith with clear relation to the Punjab. But for any UK citizen travelling abroad to consider the support that they may be given once an issue happens.
On that point.
Forgive me, I'll give way to my honourable friend who's sitting at the back, who came in first.
I thank the honourable friend for giving way, and like others, I have heard from a significant number of constituents, particularly those who attend the Guru Nanak Sikh Temple in Otago Street, but as he says, the wider community as well. And there are concerns about the different approach that the UK government seems to take to citizens held in captivity in different countries, and does he agree that there has to be a consistency of approach from the Foreign Office, and that all UK citizens who are held overseas have to be treated with fairness and justice, and that where there is a question about injustice, we have to make efforts to ensure that they have the opportunity to return home?
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's intervention. I think he might have read my speech and got to the end of it before me, because it is an issue which I will raise, because I know it's an issue not only for the all-party parliamentary group for British Sikhs, where I see the redoubtable chair of the APPG in their seat, but also the all-party parliamentary group for deaths abroad and consular support, where my honourable friend, who is in the front bench at the moment, is also the chair. But I just wish to bear with me one moment, because I do know that the honourable gentleman, friend Vanessa Strathmore, wants to come in as well, so I will let them in.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend for giving way, and I too would like to pay tribute for his
dogged pursuit of justice in this case, which is marked by the lack of action in terms of getting some response from the UK Government on this. Does he agree with me that the Foreign and Commonwealth Office deserve great praise this week for the work that they've done with Matthew Hedges and the speed and application that they put in order to resolve that case, and how that contrasts with the situation of his constituent, Jagtar? And what does he put that down to? What does he think that's taken so long in Jagtar's case?
Well, I think, my honourable friend, if I had said them, Madam Deputy Speaker, if I had the answer to that, we wouldn't need to have this debate on the floor of the House today. And I do wish the young gentleman who has been released all the very best in their future. The issue, I think, is clear for us, is that my constituent is yet to appear in court. My constituent makes an accusation of torture. And the similarity is glaring. The issue in relation to my constituent is profound. And I'm sure the Minister may wish to consider my honourable friend's question in terms of response. I will give way to my very honourable friend before I move on. Yeah, thank you.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and he has done an incredible job in making representations on his constituents' behalf, and the details of the alleged torture is absolutely horrific. And the APPG on deaths abroad and consular services was set up for that very reason, to understand why, when people die abroad or are incarcerated illegally, why they do not have the representation that we feel they deserve from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. And does he agree with me that that challenge between diplomatic relations and consular services is something that we must look more into, and that this government must do everything it can to address, to ensure that Jagtar is released and gets proper representation in due process?
Again, I won't disagree with my honourable friend. And I think it was interesting over these last few weeks that the BBC have decided to run a programme trumpeting, I suppose, in some sense, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office and critically the staff who work there, who do a very good job. The vast majority of the staff, and I'm sure there are some in the advisors' gallery today, their commitment, which I will go into in more detail later in my speech, is second to none. But in terms of right at the top, and I must be very clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, I have much respect for the Minister of State who's at the dispatch box in terms of our personal engagement on this, and I'm very grateful for their support. But right at the top, there are very serious concerns about investment. So when next week the BBC are showing the next instalment, this next episode of how wonderful the FCO is, I do hope, because they will be covering consular support, as my honourable friend mentioned, I do hope they actually get to the nitty-gritty of how people on the ground, the FCO teams on the ground, I'm not saying they're making it up on the hoof, Madam Deputy Speaker, but what they are having to do is to work with situations as they emerge without, I would consider, a proper framework, as many, for example, in the United States do, or in, for that fact, other Commonwealth nations. But I do hope to maybe make some progress, Madam Deputy Speaker, because given the fact that we have adjourned early, it does mean that I could technically talk till about 7:15.
Go for it.
Well, we'll move on quickly. Now, and let's reflect back again, as I said, about my constituents' position. Things had moved on very quickly, Madam Deputy Speaker, in relation to the initial stages. And then the then Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs, who I see is not even on the back benches today, with a very substantial Sikh diaspora in their constituency, the Right Honourable Member for Uxbridge and South Ruislip raised the issue with the Indian Minister for External Affairs. And the day after, the UK High Commissioner raised the issue again with Indian ministers. And even the Deputy High Commissioner then met with the Chief Minister of the Punjab on the 1st of December. These are, of course, I'd certainly give way to my honourable friend, the Member for Birmingham Edgbaston.
I thank the honourable member for giving way and acquiring this really important debate, and he's making an excellent speech. And can I just put on record how just commendable his leadership really in this case has been, and I know it's been very, very difficult. Will he agree with me that despite the Deputy High Commissioner in Chandigarh meeting with Jagtar, it's actually unclear what representations, if any, he made to the Chief Minister in Punjab in respect of the case and the serious allegation of torture? Do
you know that my honourable friend makes a very serious point that the House must be aware of, because, yes, I am still of that opinion. And I know that the Deputy High Commissioner returned, Madam Deputy Speaker, on recent months from India to the UK and was discussing my constituents' issue in public, at public meetings. And no invitation was extended to me as my constituency MP to discuss it with the Deputy High Commissioner. No invitation was extended to his family in the undergallery to discuss it. And how did it come about that I and my constituent's family got to discuss the issue with the Deputy High Commissioner, who has visited my constituent? I have not had that luxury. It was through the office of my honourable friend, who was aware of them being in the country. To say that meeting was fraught, or even frosty, would, I think, be the diplomatic way of putting it, Madam Deputy Speaker. So I wholeheartedly can't disagree with my honourable friend. As I say, I have to say, though the initial contacts have been welcome, I can't say that they have not been, but these issues create a consistent narrative over the last year. Superficiality underpinned by an incoherent approach to consular support, which should concern all of us. And whether or not the government lives up to the promise given by the then Minister of State in terms of extreme action, I do hope that when the Minister does rise to respond, that he might correct me if I have doubts about that. Now, I must say, I'm glad to say, however, the government has not only been the only source of pressure that's been applied to the government of the Republic of India in Jagtar's case, and that in this place, and that's why I return now to the all-party parliamentary group for British Sikhs, led by the redoubtable and honourable member for Birmingham Edgbaston, who's been a great source of support for both myself, for the family, and also for my staff, for my team. I don't use the word staff, my team, and some of them are in the gallery today. A great source of information, and they've done their bit to raise awareness of the story, and I know a few of them are in the chamber today, and I am extremely personally grateful. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Sikh community across these islands makes an invaluable contribution to our daily life and to the culture of these islands. They have also been vocal in keeping this case in the limelight, whether it be organisations like the Sikh Federation or Gurdwaras across these islands. I would not have been buttonholed by so many honourable and right honourable members asking me about the case were it not for their Sikh constituents raising it repeatedly with them. And I pay due commitment to those members of the Sikh community across the UK. Because they face some very difficult decisions about what it means to be Sikh in relationship to India. And there is a clear issue in how they approach return to Punjab in relation to some of the issues we raise here today. I also know that I and the Singh Johal family have been very grateful for the work that the charity Redress has done. And again, due to the fact that the House's business has fallen early, some of their staff, their team who'd wanted to be here today can't, and I'd like to pay due regard to them for the work that they have done. For Redress is a charity which helps survivors of torture, Madam Deputy Speaker, to obtain justice, and their attempts in this case have been most welcome. And this is where I turn to one of the honourable members talked about earlier on the United Nations, because it was Redress who have actually sent an appeal to the United Nations Special Rapporteur on torture, Professor Niles Melzer, in December last year, asking them to ensure that India, the Republic of India, could guarantee that Jagtar would suffer no repeat of the accused torture from that November. Jagtar's case also featured in the report they released earlier this year about the plight of UK nationals tortured abroad. However, it is my deep regret, Madam Deputy Speaker, to say that it has not been met with any discernible reaction, either from the Republic of India authorities, despite the numerous examples cited on the government-to-government contacts, and despite my having first raised the issue with them some time ago. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, in having this debate on the floor of the House, I I do not intend to disagree with the Government of the Republic of India on its sovereign right and ability to apply the laws of their republic in the way they see fit. To do so from the floor of the former colonial Parliament would be an affront to their dignity and the sovereignty of their citizenship. Nevertheless, my duty to my constituent is to highlight that serious charges have been laid, and I must only hope that they are tested in a manner consistent with the laws and practices of the Republic of India. That is, the rule of law, and that is due process. One of the few things I believe everyone in this House can support. However, again, I am afraid to say that these two necessary pillars of liberal democratic statehood are being sorely tested in Jagtar's case. Just over a month after he was arrested, and just after the Foreign Commonwealth officials had met with Jagtar, a story appeared on the Times Now website, which appeared to show extensive knowledge of the case, and most disturbingly, showed a video of Jagtar confessing to several crimes, something he obviously contends were done under duress. This has been a set pattern for a series of seemingly well-informed leaks and briefings to Indian media regarding the case, which have caused great concern to those who wish to see Jagtar receive a fair trial, and have often had an often sinister, they have also had an often sinister, if not sectarian, air. And in terms of due process, I think it's very important, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I'm not standing here, nor should any member of any parliament in a liberal democracy, demanding before trial a constituent under the rule of law is set free if serious charges are being brought. To the honourable gentleman, I will.
I'd like to thank the honourable member for giving way here. I'd like to say on behalf of Scottish Labour that we do support the Sikh community, and we support you, the work you've been done here, and your constituent, and we take praise on that. Thanks very much.
I thank my own friend for that. The notion is quite clear that I wish my constituent, if charges are to be properly laid, he has been now in court over 60 times, not one witness brought forward, no one appears, he's then taken back to prison. I wish for him to either receive a fair, transparent trial based on due process, or, if there are no witnesses, if there is no evidence, to be released. To the honourable gentleman, then I will come to him.
I'm grateful to the honourable member for Western Bartonshire for giving way, and I think that the point he's making now is the critical point. The legitimate role for him as the constituency MP and for others in this chamber who represent large Sikh communities throughout the UK is not to tell Indian ministers or the Indian courts what to do, but it is through ministers and through our own Foreign Office to ask that citizens are afforded proper consular access, due process and fair trials. And then it is up to the legal system to pronounce on guilt or innocence. But it is legitimate for us to ask for those things.
I certainly agree with the honourable gentleman. The international rules-based system is being attacked at every corner. And for those of us who believe in liberal democratic government, we should give no inch to calling out undemocratic practice, whether it be in a close ally, whether it be the Republic of India or the UAE. To the honourable gentleman, I'll certainly give.
Thank the honourable member and my fellow member of the Defence Committee for giving way. But isn't this really now the crux of the matter, that if India is so sure about the guilt of Jagtar in this, why do they not bring this to an early trial? Why, if they think they have assembled so much evidence, do they not either let him free, or And I would hope, therefore, this is something that our Foreign Office would now be taking up to say, bring this to a conclusion, bring this to a trial. Otherwise, with over a year having gone by, you haven't established a case.
My honourable friend makes a very clear point, because since nearly day one in this case, state authorities, specifically in the Punjab, have been quite open that they believe my constituent to be guilty. They have conducted a trial by media, and they have made it quite clear that they expect him to be found guilty if a trial should ever take place. That clearly undermines the very principle of due process in the Republic of India, and that really should concern us all. To my honourable friend, I certainly...
I thank my honourable friend, and he's been passionate in support of his constituent, as he has been over the last year. Does he share my concerns that the Indian authorities currently are not only sitting on their hands, but they're actually boasting of their successes, their diplomatic successes with the UK government?
I'm certainly not going to disagree, because I think actually everybody is boasting about their diplomatic successes against the UK at the moment in a most dreadful sense, and that should concern us all. Let me just briefly continue, Madam Deputy Speaker. In terms of the approach, the epitome of the approach we've seen recently appearances in the Indian Deputy High Commissioner, Dinesh Pathak, on the BBC Asian Network in January earlier this year, where he breezily said that Jagtar will be charged and he has not been subject to torture, despite the lack of any public investigation by the authorities of the Republic of India, and the fact that no charges were laid before the courts, basically, for more than 6 months. So these realities must be given to people to understand the true nature of what is happening. Such comments have led many to conclude that due process has been overlooked, if not intentionally undermined, and that many have already made up their mind about my constituents' innocence or guilt. Something which is utterly unacceptable to me, I am sure to the Minister, and I hope to members from all sides of the House. I'll give way to my honourable friend.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way once again. He's been very generous. I mean, just to take him back very briefly to the point about media coverage and press, there are some very significant parallels with the case of my constituent, Kirsty Maxwell. She was, we believe, killed abroad in Spain. But the distress that it causes to the family when they have misreporting and misinformation in the media, and the lack of support that is often given by the SCO, I appreciate there are significant challenges, is something that we absolutely must address. And I commend my honourable friend for the comments and the challenge he has made to the Indian press in regard to his constituent.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's intervention, because in terms of media and differing approaches, since I was first elected to this House, Madam Deputy Speaker, in 2015, I've had to deal with several cases for consular support, on where media intrusion on the reality has had a detrimental impact on cases, and not just for Jagtar. I'm very mindful of the case of my constituent Lisa Brown, who has been missing in Spain and we presume murdered, and the distress caused to her family for some of the way in which the media approached that case. And it's the exact same for many of us who have constituents who have either died or are in detention abroad. May I say, though, Madam Deputy Speaker, I can only hope that the publicity generated by this debate today will leave the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in no doubt that they must not relent in their efforts to ensure that all of these elements, transparency over the torture allegations, of due process, and the assumption of innocence until proven guilty, and the rule of law in ensuring that all allegations are dealt with appropriately, must be addressed by the Government of the Republic of India, and the family and I expect the FCO to fulfil these duties. Critically given, Madam Deputy Speaker, that at some point, somewhere down the line, we might actually eventually be able to have a trade agreement with the Republic of India. What type of trade will we have where we might sacrifice our own ability to defend democracy and its pillars for free trade? But, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me touch briefly on elements away from, as we have been, on Jagtar's case, which give me cause for concern. The job of a Member of Parliament gives you the privilege and the challenge of representing all of your constituents. And this often means offering assistance when they have had adverse experiences abroad. So Jagtar's case is not, as I have said, the only one that I've seen up close with the FCO. And while I found the overwhelming majority of those who work with the Foreign Commonwealth Office to be professional, dedicated and diligent representatives of their organisation, while I know I can't name them, I know they have heard me say this. They are dealing with structures and resources which often do not allow them to give the level of service they would hope to, something which can cause a large amount of frustration for family members and creates a vicious cycle of misunderstanding and failed expectation. Because when myself and Jagtar's brother see a Minister of the Crown, say from the dispatch box here, say that they will take extreme action in Jagtar's case, we do not immediately appreciate, nor any of us would, that the staff who will be the sharp end of that action will be under-resourced, poorly supported, and left at the whims, I must say, of politicians who lead that organisation. It is something that my colleague, I know, as I've said, the Honourable Member for Livingston, has shone a light on their work in the All-Party Group for Deaths Abroad and Consular Services. And I'm sure members across the House will agree that it is vital work that should improve the experience of all of our constituents, should they find themselves in the same position that Jagtar's family have found themselves in. We all appreciate that we are in the middle of the greatest upheaval of this political state's foreign policy since 1921. And if members in this House don't know what happened in 1921 to 1922 to what was then the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, go to the library. And it has been all too often left unsaid in our present predicament that a global Britain of any sort must be properly resourced, and that resources must not be to the detriment of consular services across the globe, ensuring a consistent service, allowing the best practice, which we know does exist in the Foreign Commonwealth Office, and listening to the thousands of dedicated, diligent and professional staff across the globe to ensure that families who do experience the worst are given a clear but compassionate idea of the roles and responsibilities the Foreign Commonwealth Office has towards them. It would make a world of difference. They're not asking for huge elements of massive investment. They're asking for clarity, process that we can all agree on. Families like Jagtar's appreciate that, and I must be clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, that there is no way to simply assuage their concerns, and that the efforts made by ministers cannot always be made public or indeed shared with them. The family and I appreciate the efforts, I must say, of the Prime Minister in raising the case with their counterpart, Prime Minister Modi, in April. But I'm sure that the Minister appreciates that we are wondering why it is still necessary to be asking many of the same questions we were a year ago through an adjournment debate on the floor of the House of Commons. So you may be glad to know, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm going to start bringing my remarks to a close. With that, my honourable friend does an intervention. I'll certainly give way.
I thank the honourable gentleman, my honourable friend, very, very much for a final intervention. Would he share my concern on the point of properly resourcing and training our consular staff, who do a very, very difficult job in some of the most challenging circumstances, that they will be facing up to £1 billion of cuts in the coming financial year? Add that in with the challenge that we face with Brexit, that our Foreign and Commonwealth Office needs the support of this government and its ministers to make sure that our constituents are properly represented when they get into challenges or trouble abroad.
I'm not going to disagree with my honourable friend, because there is, as my honourable friend mentions, a resource issue. And when the greatest resource of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office is the members of staff in it. And they have the knowledge and the capacity. No matter what I think of the constitutional position of this country, they are diligent professionals in their job. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me bring my my remarks to close by asking.
Will my honourable friend give way?
I will, to my honourable friend. Yeah.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I know he's coming to a close, but can I praise him for his tireless campaign on behalf of his constituent Jagtar and his family? But will he share my deep concerns that, given the recent success of the Foreign Commonwealth Office around the publicity of the Matthew Hughes case, that this simply is not good enough, that the Minister hopefully will stand here today and make platitudes, but the simple fact is there has been a lack of capacity and inaction in this case, which has resulted in Jagtar's family being adversely affected? And does he share my concern that the Minister can and should do more in this case?
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's intervention, and I would say this, that while we all appreciate as parliamentarians that every consular case is different. We cannot assume that any case is the same, and therefore we appreciate a level of flexibility. And as I said earlier on, in answer to my honourable friend's intervention, that the case we've been talking about from the UAE is extraordinary how it's just suddenly happened. I'm delighted for them. But there are levels to which I think even the Minister could not even answer that question, and I will give them that, because as I said earlier on, the Minister of State has been resolute in their support. But I think we now need to wind up and ask questions that the Minister will be able to answer or take away and maybe write to us, specifically in the case in the arrest and detention of Jagtar Singh Johal. First of all, what does extreme action mean? And can the Minister tell us in which ways this has been undertaken since those words were uttered by the then Minister of State at the dispatch box? What have the authorities of the Republic of India done, if anything, to address the allegations of torture which now rest with the UN rapporteur? Does the Minister agree with me that the leaks and briefings to the press from the authorities in India risk making a fair trial for Jagtar all but impossible? And could the Minister tell me what plans the Foreign Commonwealth Office has to improve the experiences of families of UK citizens who experience adverse experiences abroad? Finally, in terms of these questions, and this is the important one, when will the Secretary of State fulfil the commitment of their predecessor in meeting myself and the Singh Johal family? How has it come about, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I am having to make that request on the floor of the House of Commons when time and time again communication with ministers, not even a reply, even, would you believe, Madam Deputy Speaker, a point where I actually had to not only ask the Chair, the Speaker of the House, how to go about getting an answer, in which he replied, you've written your letter, if you've not got a reply, how about putting down a written question? What an extraordinary state of affairs in a modern parliamentary democracy. What do we have to go back to? The quill and paper? An extraordinary state of affairs. So that question's important, because in terms of the inconsistency of the narrative of other cases, where the Foreign Secretary, both the present one and their predecessor, have unequivocally opened their doors to meet certain families of specific cases. And I am delighted for them, absolutely delighted. But it's an extraordinary state of affairs that I'm rising to this point. And I do see my honourable friend across from me. I've said to him earlier, I mentioned an incident that happened to both of us in relation to that. And he'll forgive me if I can't remember his constituency. It's very Walsall North. My honourable friend, the member for Walsall North, on behalf of his own constituents, met as a constituency MP with the then Foreign Secretary, and that meeting in regards to my constituent, which any MP can talk about, an issue raised by their own constituents, made its way to social media. And I made that clear to my honourable friend that I was delighted that it raised the issue. But what I wasn't delighted about was that the Foreign Secretary was sitting talking to another constituency MP about my constituent's issue. They wouldn't respond to letters, and when they gave from a sedentary position, a nod to the Minister, who is in a difficult, in a sticky wicket, as we would say, with this one. Said from a sedentary position, and then he was off within a week, because it... to the Honourable Member for Walsall, of course, I will certainly give it.
And I've used the word honourable friend deliberately so. Yes, so Jagtar's cousin lives in my constituency of Walsall North, came to see me. I have a strong and large Sikh community in my constituency, so of course I took the opportunity to raise that case on their behalf, and all I meant to do was add my weight to support the case being made by my honourable friend.
I'm delighted what my honourable friend for Walsall North did, Madam Deputy Speaker, because what it highlighted, it gave the case impetus. It reminds the nation, the state and members that this continues, but the Foreign Secretary had to be asked via someone else on the floor, are you going to meet him? What a ridiculous proposition that we come to that stage. So that final question is, when is the Foreign Secretary going to meet with the constituency Member of Parliament for West Dumbartonshire and the Singh Johal family? These allegations, Madam Deputy Speaker, of mental and physical torture, of threats of violence against family members, simulated executions and forced confessions have been horrifying enough when we first heard them over a year ago. It's hardly got any harder as the last year has gone. It's got harder as the last year has gone on. Furthermore, the longer it takes for the authorities of the Republic of India to address the issue, the possibility of it reoccurring, that is torture, cannot be ruled out. And I hope everyone in this House can join me in beseeching the Government of the Republic of India to do all that it can to ensure that transparency, due process and the rule of law win the day in this case. I am grateful for those honourable members who have attended today, Madam Deputy Speaker. I am grateful for those who have intimated their support but are unable to be here, and to show our support to the wider Sikh community across these islands for my constituent, a son of the Rock of Dumbarton.
Minister Mark Field.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I am very grateful to the Honourable Member for West Dumbartonshire for securing this debate on the detention of his constituent in India, on whose behalf I know he has been working extremely hard over this past year or so. May I also recognise the very deep concern felt by a number of other members who are gracing us with their presence today in this adjournment debate about Mr Johal's situation. Representing as I do an inner city seat, the seat where we are today, I also have a reasonably sized Sikh community in my own constituency, and they have made me well aware at the outset of the issues on this particular case. May I also say how much we appreciate the desperately difficult time this must be for Mr Johal's family and friends, as well as I say for the wider Sikh community here in the United Kingdom, particularly in view of the very specific concerns around mistreatment and torture to which the Honourable Gentleman gave us detail earlier. Of course.
I thank the Minister for allowing me to intervene, and would he appreciate and acknowledge that the family of Jagtar Singh Johal has been resolute in its persistence in stating that Jagtar is innocent, and in terms of the allegations of very serious allegations of torture and confession under duress, that the very least that the family deserves is that the Foreign Secretary should meet them, along with the Honourable Member for West Dumbartonshire, to try to get to the bottom of this issue.
May I thank the Honourable Gentleman for Slough for his comments, and as he knows, maybe the House doesn't know, we've tried to work together on other issues to try and recognise the very important contribution the Sikh community have made, and it is an ongoing work to try and get a proper memorial for that work that has been done through the wars. I haven't even started to answer this question if the Honourable Gentleman for Coventry would forgive me. May I just say this? I obviously don't have control of the Foreign Secretary's diary. He will be well aware that this debate is taking place. It hasn't been a standard half an hour, two-member adjournment debate. The fact that there are so many members who have contributed to this debate is something that I think is very powerful in this particular case. I will make representations, if I may, to him to suggest that he should do as the honourable gentleman wishes. I give way.
Minister giving way. To reinforce what my honourable friends just said, I know why I accept the Minister can't commit to meeting the family on behalf of the Foreign Secretary, but you certainly can convey that message, because with all due respect to the Honourable Member for Walsall, and I'll speak to him in securing a meeting with the Foreign Secretary, it doesn't look good if the Foreign Secretary don't meet the Honourable Gentleman from debating on this case. That's very important. You try and convey that to the Foreign Secretary.
I've always worked on the basis, as the honourable gentleman will know, of trying to work on a cross-party basis, particularly on these very difficult matters. May I say that for those who are interested in the BBC programme on the Foreign Office, I do believe Thursday's programme will talk about a consular case, and one particular consular case from Cambodia in my own part of the world, where there was half a dozen MPs cross-party basis who expressed particular concerns. Let me, if I may, try to respond to many of the points that have been raised, and I will also undertake to write to those whose questions I may not be in a position to fully answer, of course.
Gentleman for giving way, and before he comes to those points, I just want to say gently to him that when I set up the all-party parliamentary group on deaths abroad and consular services, I could not have imagined the impact it would have had on myself and my staff who have heard the evidence from over 50 families. So I cannot imagine what it is like for a family who has someone who has died abroad, who has been incarcerated, held prisoner or gone missing. So I want to say to him on a very personal basis that the testimonies of those families has highlighted to me that there are significant challenges, and I believe failings, and I believe that there are areas that we can work together on across this House, because almost every member has had a constituency case, and I hope that he would give a commitment today to work with me and with the all-party parliamentary group to fix some of those issues and look for the solutions to make sure that no family has to go through what Jagtar's families had to go through, or any of the other families that we have heard evidence from.
May I thank the Honourable Lady, and whilst inevitably I cannot make such a guarantee to suggest that no other families will go through some of these difficulties, may I say that clearly I'm only too happy to work with the Honourable Lady. Unfortunately, it is the nature of being a Foreign Office Minister, and certainly in the past 18 months, that I have met several families, who are not obviously constituents of mine, but are constituents of other Honourable Members who have been through this harrowing experiences to which she refers. Well, if I may just of course.
Such report, and I'm grateful for the Minister beginning this response. And I just want to reiterate the understanding, I'm sure, from all members of this House of the commitment and diligence from many of the members of staff in the FCO, who are the department's greatest asset. I think that needs to be yet again put on the record.
Hear, hear.
I'm very pleased, not least for my own private office and indeed all who work in my team. I think I'm very honoured and lucky to be a minister in the department I am in. And whilst I will accept that, of course, on occasion, this being human nature, mistakes can be made, there can be oversights. Generally, we have an extremely professional and dedicated team throughout the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, but particularly in the consular area, where there must be some extremely harrowing work that goes on, and to deal with that on a daily basis. I think all of us know as constituency MPs, we have, of course, cases where we deal with constituents which are heart-rending to the first degree, but that probably is the exception rather than the rule in consular cases. Particularly, I think of our consular help in some of the Balearic Islands or in places such as Thailand, where you're dealing with tragic death of young people on a virtually daily basis. These things are very, very difficult. I want, if I may, to start with a formal apology, and put this apology on the record. It's something that I've done in writing, but an apology to Mr. Docherty-Hughes for my department's failure to respond to his freedom of information request in a timely manner. We do aim for the highest standards of customer service, and I am deeply apologetic that we have not met those on this occasion. As I said to colleagues here in the House when this issue was last debated in March, Mr Johal's case is very well known to me and has been a priority for the government at the highest levels since his arrest just over a year ago. The then Foreign Secretary raised concerns with his Indian counterpart soon after Mr Johal's arrest to press for effective consular access. The Prime Minister, as the Honourable Gentleman for West Dunbartonshire pointed out, raised those concerns about Mr Johal's case directly with Prime Minister Modi of the Republic of India when he visited the United Kingdom in April. Mr Johal's situation has also been a priority for me. I personally raised this case with the Minister for Foreign Affairs during my visit to India earlier this year. I indeed have also raised it with the outgoing Indian High Commissioner to the UK, Mr Sinha, last month, and indeed just this morning I was able to reiterate these concerns to the new Indian High Commissioner, and I can reassure the House that she is appraised of not just the FCO's interest, but very importantly the interest of many parliamentarians in seeing a thorough and effective investigation into Jagtar's allegations. May I just say this, if I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have a little time on our hands, but just say this about the role of APPGs. They are, in my view, invaluable. I try to engage as far as I can, as many honourable and right honourable members will know, with their members in meetings. I was actually with a joint meeting of the Bangladeshi and Burmese APPG only yesterday. They are valuable because what goes on the floor of the House, whether in parliamentary questions or indeed through all party groups, is noticed and reported upon very quickly by high commissions and embassies to go back. So I would very much encourage honourable members. This is in a very important way. It puts pressure on us as ministers, but actually it provides a very effective safeguard to try to make a strong case. And may I also say, one of the disappointing things for me on this particular case has been, and I inherited when coming into office 18 months ago, the rather notorious Chennai 6 case that had been dragging on for almost 5 years by that stage, and we were able to get the individuals released within a matter of a few months. These things do often take time. The Indian legal process can be slow, as indeed can ours. I'm not making a value judgment here, but I've always tried in relation to consular cases, and I hope the House will understand that too. What I always say is to try and downplay expectations. I mean, under-promise and over-deliver insofar as you can. Try and make it clear that sometimes you are waiting, one has to wait for a considerable length of time to get a response. I know that can be incredibly frustrating, and particularly where there are allegations, as there are here, of maltreatment and torture, that becomes an even more serious state of affairs. I know that, as the Honourable Gentleman will be aware, that we've met with Mr Johal's brother, Gurpreet, on 3 occasions over the past year to try to discuss the very slow progress in relation to this case. I've offered a further meeting to the family. I do accept, and I will try and make representations that they can meet up with the Foreign Secretary. I suspect I shall also be there at any such meeting going forward. It is the case that embassy officials, including our High Commissioner in New Delhi, have raised concerns with the most senior officials of the Indian authorities on a number of occasions. Our consular staff have been working hard to assist Mr Johal and his family, both in India and here in the UK. Staff in India have, I understand, visited him on 15 occasions since his arrest, most recently on the 5th of November this year. These visits do allow us to monitor Mr Johal's welfare and check that he continues to be able to meet with his legal representatives in private. That obviously was not the case during the early months of his incarceration. One of our key concerns in the representations we have made has been Mr Johal's allegations of torture and mistreatment during his initial period in police custody and his right to be afforded a fair trial. Whilst in all fairness I probably would not have used the phrase extreme action, I don't think extreme is something that many people would associate with me in my brand of politics. Nonetheless, allegations like this are taken extremely seriously, and I know that the Honourable Lady no longer in her place from from northeast Wolverhampton asked about raising the case with the UN and the UN's special procedures. We will continue to cooperate very closely with all mechanisms of the UN Human Rights Council, and we would encourage all other countries, like India, to cooperate with the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights. So, yes, we will ensure that this case is brought to his attention. On the 14th of December of 2017, Mr. Johal asked us to raise these particular allegations, the allegations of torture and maltreatment. We did so once we had those details without delay, making clear our expectation that India conduct an impartial investigation and an independent medical examination. And we continue to raise those allegations vigorously. Of course.
Response, and as the Minister saying that the authorities of the Republic of India have yet either to respond to those questions, or they're refuting them, or they say that they happened?
At this stage, they are refuting that they've happened. And again, I would like to, if I may, have a chance to write to the honourable gentleman with full details, because I would rather not say something on the floor of the House that is inadvertently inaccurate. But I think I would like, if I may, just to touch on our policy on the issues of mistreatment and torture. Any allegations of torture and mistreatment of detainees are prohibited under international law and are absolutely unacceptable in any circumstances. We will therefore take allegations of this very seriously, but we also have to take care to avoid doing anything that might put the person making an allegation or those connected to him at any further risk. Our priority is always to ensure the best interest of the detainee, and in this sort of case, I think many members will understand that often a lot of work goes on underneath the radar rather than with a hell of a lot of publicity. And may I say, actually, just on that point, I would very much agree with what the Honourable Gentleman for West Dunbartonshire said, that any sense that there have been leaks and briefings to the press, and again, I'm not suggesting that that has happened, but clearly the press have had run some stories in India. That obviously risks undermining any chance of a fair trial, and it's not an acceptable state of affairs. It would be no more acceptable, of course, if that were happening here in the UK. So our priority will always be to ensure the best interests of a detainee, and decisions upon the precise action we might take in response to allegations of mistreatment will be made on a case-by-case basis and only with the individual's consent. When British nationals are detained overseas, their health and welfare is our top priority. We make every effort to ensure that prisoners are receiving adequate food, water and medical treatment, and that they have access at the earliest opportunity to legal advice. I should perhaps, if I may, just say this. There's also, where there are joint nationals, clearly as the Honourable Lady from Glasgow, because there's a particular case that we've had a dealing on, where there's a joint national, and clearly we don't have that locus, which I think our members will understand, if not entirely support, but clearly where there's a joint nationality and that person is incarcerated in one of the other countries, or the other country in which they are a citizen, then it is not our place to have consular standing. But as soon as we hear about a detention or arrest, our consular staff will attempt to make contact and to visit the individual as soon as possible. Subsequent visits will, of course, depend upon the nature and the context of the case, and indeed, in some cases, on the practicality, where someone is being imprisoned many hundreds of miles away from the nearest consular headquarters, or indeed High Commission. It can therefore be more difficult to visit on a very regular basis. But we are aware that for many detainees, our visits are a lifeline, and for some, our staff may well be the only visitors whom they receive. I can assure all honourable members that we aim to afford every case equal importance and to provide tailored support and guidance to individuals and their families. The UK has over 2,000 British nationals in detention around the world at any one time, and in the last financial year alone, our staff overseas dealt with approximately 5,000 detainees. It is difficult, for all the best will in the world, when you try to have a standard procedure, that nonetheless, when dealing with those numbers, in some cases, we will be seen to have fallen short. I will try and work to ensure we have flexible standards that can apply across the board, but obviously take account of the fact that there are very different circumstances. But I'm very happy, as I say, to work with the all-party group for those with death in custody in particular to try and find some sort of protocol that works for the future. Providing that consular assistance, though, to any British national in distress overseas is central to our work at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Whilst the government doesn't have a legal duty of care to British nationals abroad, we are proud that we continue to provide that comprehensive round-the-clock service for anyone finding themselves in difficulty. We work particularly hard to support those who may be vulnerable and who are most in need of our help. Alongside the support we provide, we also have a long-standing partnership with a charity called Prisoners Abroad, who provide practical and emotional support to British people who are detained overseas. There are, of course, limitations to the absolute extent of any service we can offer. We're not in a position to take decisions on behalf of people, nor are we able to do everything that might be asked of us at any one time. As a matter of policy, we do not pay outstanding bills, including legal fees, as we are not funded to provide financial assistance, nor does the FCO seek preferential treatment for British nationals. This means that we do not and must not interfere in civil and criminal court proceedings, and I think the Honourable Gentleman was very understanding in his contribution earlier on that point. But it is right that we respect the legal systems of other countries, just as we would expect foreign nationals to respect our laws and our legal processes when they are here in the UK. But we can intervene on behalf of British nationals where they are not treated in line with internationally accepted standards or if there are unreasonable delays in procedures. Now, a number of colleagues here have raised the case of Matthew Hedges, and of course everyone is delighted that the UAE have chosen to pardon him in such short order. The assistance that we provide to British nationals does depend entirely on the individual circumstances of the case and the local conditions. So I think it is unfair to draw or make any implications about comparisons in particular cases. Our actions are designed to be appropriate to the individual and as effective as possible. There is no suggestion that there is a preferential treatment because of any cultural or other difficulties that may apply. And it should be said in relation, for example, to the Chennai Sikhs, they were all long-standing British, English and Scottish citizens. There was no racial element that could possibly have been suggested about their incarceration for as long as they were. In many ways, the Matthew Hedges case is a good example of something that I think all of us in the Foreign Office and indeed in the consular case can rejoice, a case that gets turned around unexpectedly on a very quick basis. But for every win, as it were, of that description, there are many other cases where perhaps, as I say, under the radar, we're working extremely hard for many, many months without quick and positive results of that sort. A number of colleagues have also spoken movingly about the impact that a death overseas can have on loved ones, particularly when that death takes place in either violent or distressing circumstances. Our staff across the world will continue to work with dedication and empathy to support British nationals when they require our assistance. And whilst we also welcome feedback from British nationals who've received consular assistance and indeed their relatives who have also had that assistance, we will try to improve our services and staff. But I will make a pledge, if I may, from here, to work closely, if I may, with the all-party group, and I hope that members here will play their part in that. These are some of obviously the most distressing and difficult cases, and it is the distress to me that there are British citizens who feel that the FCO has fallen short in its consular service on some occasions. Clearly, it is something we will continue to take very seriously, and as I say, if we can try to work together as a Parliament on a cross-party basis to try to find a way in which we can make improvements to that, then I stand ready to work with colleagues here. May I conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker? All of us know that the detention of a loved one in any circumstances is distressing. It would be very distressing if it was one of our relatives that was in that position. Of course, that is particularly compounded when this matter happens overseas, where contact with friends and family is limited and the legal process is unfamiliar. Our consular staff at home and abroad do work very hard to support families in this situation, and honourable members will be well aware that we often have locally employed members able to speak local languages, to have more of an understanding perhaps of the culture and indeed the different legal process, who play a very important part in our consular teams across the world. We do take each and every one of these cases extremely seriously, and we provide dedicated consular assistance to those most in need of our help, literally 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. In the case of Mr Johal, I can assure the Honourable Member for West Dunbartonshire that we shall continue to do all that we can to support him and his family. The fact that we have this debate here today, I think, will make it very clear to the Indian authorities, to the new Indian High Commissioner here in London, that we are ready to continue to raise our concerns about his case at the highest levels, and will continue to do so until there is a resolution of these matters. Thank you.
Thank you. The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order.